If you have no discipline, you will stay weak forever. The morning sun hadn't fully risen yet. In a small, unremarkable town, a young man stood at the edge of a vast, silent field, staring at the horizon. His breath was steady, his muscles sore, and his hands clenched tightly around a shovel. He'd been standing there for hours, unable to start digging. The thought that kept running through his head was simple but terrifying. If I don't change, I will always stay like this. Weak, stuck. The sky above him, painted in hues of orange and pink, seemed to mock his indecision. Everything around him was quiet, almost too quiet. Except for the voice inside his head, the voice that had been repeating the same thing for years. You're not strong enough. It was the voice of every failure he had ever faced. The voice of every dream he let slip away. Every plan that fell apart because he couldn't bring himself to follow through. But there was a deeper, darker voice too. The one that kept him from even picking up the shovel. The voice that whispered, "It's too late. You've already wasted so much time. What's the point in trying?" He shook his head, trying to clear the noise. He had been here before, standing at the edge of something that could change everything, but he never seemed to have the courage to take that first step. And today felt no different. He wanted to scream, to run, to escape the crushing weight of his own limitations. But as the sun rose higher, casting long shadows over the earth, something else began to stir deep inside him. He didn't have the luxury of waiting any longer. This young man, let's call him Jake, wasn't any different from millions of others in the world. He had the potential to do great things, to be something extraordinary. But there was one problem: discipline, or more accurately, the lack of it. Jake had been told by everyone around him that he had talent, he had charm, he had the ability to achieve whatever he set his mind to. But for years, his mind wasn't set on anything for long enough to make a real impact. He had tried. Oh, how he tried. There were books he bought that sat untouched on shelves, diet plans he'd started on Monday, only to abandon by Wednesday, a million ideas he jotted down in notebooks that were now collecting dust. He'd jump from one thing to another, convinced that the next idea, the next opportunity, would be the one that finally stuck. But it never did. Jake's life was like a house built on sand, and every wave of failure, every moment of procrastination, chipped away at its foundation. People saw his potential, but they didn't see the hours wasted, the promises broken, the internal battles fought in silence. They didn't see the invisible chains he had forged with his own indecisiveness. He wasn't weak in the traditional sense. He wasn't a sloth or a coward. But the weakness was there, lingering just beneath the surface. The kind of weakness that comes from never truly committing. The kind of weakness that comes from allowing distractions to control your life. It was the weakness of someone who was afraid of failure so much that he never took the risk of succeeding. Jake wasn't lazy, he just lacked the discipline to push himself through the discomfort of growth. And that lack of discipline made him stay stuck in the same loop. One morning, a voice broke through the silence of Jake's internal struggle. It wasn't a comforting voice, nor a motivational one. It was sharp, direct. It belonged to an older man, a man who had seen the world in ways Jake never would, a man whose life had been shaped by discipline, by the refusal to let weakness define him. The man walked up to Jake while he was sitting in a small cafe, staring out the window at nothing in particular, just watching the world pass by. Jake had been in this position so many times before, wanting change, but too afraid to make it. Too afraid to dig in, literally and figuratively. The man sat down across from him without asking, his gaze unwavering. "You know," the man began, his voice low and steady, "you're always going to be weak until you learn what real discipline is. It's not just about forcing yourself to get things done. It's about facing the truth of what you're capable of and refusing to accept mediocrity." Jake blinked, the words hitting him like a punch to the gut. He had heard motivational speeches, read self-help books, but this man's words felt like they were carving into him, exposing the core of his weakness. "You think you've tried everything," the man continued, his eyes piercing. "But you haven't. You've just scratched the surface. The real work isn't in the ideas or the plans. It's in the doing. Day in and day out. It's about getting up, even when you don't feel like it. It's about setting a standard for yourself and refusing to lower it." Jake felt something stir inside him, a flicker of recognition, of understanding. But it was also terrifying. Could it be true? Could it really be that simple? Days passed. Jake's world remained unchanged on the outside, but inside, something had begun to shift. The next morning, he woke up earlier than usual. Not because he felt like it, but because he had made a decision, a small one. He was going to take action. For the first time, he didn't hit the snooze button. He didn't let his mind wander back to the comfortable thoughts of just staying in bed. He got up. He didn't feel a rush of excitement. He felt the weight of it, of committing to something. But that weight was different now. It wasn't suffocating. It was empowering. He put on his shoes, walked outside, and picked up the shovel that had been waiting for him for days. It wasn't the most dramatic of steps. There was no life-altering moment in that first motion. But it was a step, and then another, and another. With each step, Jake felt stronger. Not physically, his muscles still ached, but mentally. Every time he resisted the urge to quit, every time he pushed through the discomfort of doing something he didn't want to do, it was like breaking a small chain that had kept him bound. For the first time, Jake felt like he was in control. Not of the world around him, but of himself, of his actions, of his choices. And so Jake kept digging. Day after day, the shovel sank into the earth. It was hard work. There were moments when he wanted to stop, to turn back. But then he remembered the words of the old man and the question that had been asked of him. How many times are you going to let this happen before you finally stop being weak? As the days turned into weeks, Jake didn't stop. He realized something important. Discipline wasn't about making huge leaps in a single day. It was about showing up every day, no matter how small the steps seemed. And in those small steps, something bigger was happening. He was building strength, not just in his body, but in his spirit. The field he was digging in, the one that had seemed so daunting and endless at first, started to take shape. What had once been a barren piece of land was now becoming something more, something meaningful, something that only hard work and dedication could create. Weeks turned into months, and Jake's transformation was nothing short of remarkable. Not because he was suddenly perfect or had all the answers, but because he had made a choice to stop letting weakness define him, to stop waiting for the perfect moment, the right opportunity. He understood now that discipline wasn't a sudden breakthrough. It was a practice, a way of life. And the man who had spoken to him all those months ago, Jake never saw him again, but the lessons he taught him stayed with him, etched into his very being. Jake had finally broken free. End with a deeply thought-provoking takeaway. Discipline is not about being perfect. It's not about the big victories. It's about those small, everyday actions that build momentum. So ask yourself, what small step can you take today that will move you closer to where you want to be? If this story resonated with you, comment below with the phrase, "I choose discipline." It'll let me know you're serious about stepping into your power. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, share it with them. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this one. And stay tuned for a connected story about the power of consistency. Trust me, you won't want to miss it.